So the thing to remember as we're going through this presentation is to remember the presence. All right. Remember this presence. The presence of what? The presence of God, the presence of the divine, the presence of your wish fulfilled. So something seems empty, which should tell you, oh, I want something here. And the very fact that a desire comes upon you should be all you need to know that it is already done. It's already present. So, quoting Walter before we move on, it is thrilling to contemplate the presence and the capacity of this power which lies within every man. So let's jump into it. If the wisdom of man is foolishness in the eyes of God because of its shifting, changing basis, then how much more is the wisdom of God foolishness in the eyes of man? Who can believe that good and more good and more good can and will continuously flow into manifestation through a mere alliance with the power of Christ within? A thousand questions raise themselves in the minds of the people. None of them can be answered to their satisfaction, for they are working from the wavering basis of the conscious thinking which says, when I would do good, I do evil. So uncertain is this conscious mind of its point of direction that it hurts that which it would help, and vice versa. So you guys, when y'all call me and we get in these conversations about, well, um, what about this? What about that? Should this person change? Should that person change? Like I gave them a book so they could read, or um, I've decided to, go to therapy, which is fine. Um, whatever it is, we're using our human mind to strategize our this creation that we're trying to put out here in this world. We're trying to get the outside world to change. And to God, it's absolute foolishness. And if you really think about it, of course it's foolishness because to God, all things are created, all things are finished. And your destiny for greatness, because that's the desire on your heart, is already done. And what you are observing out here isn't actually solid. It's not actually solid and real. We know this from science that it's not solid and real. So to God, all this human thinking that we do to try to get something or fix something or change something is foolish. But of course, to our rational, logical mind, as we're trying to suss it out, and I'm guilty of this, we're trying to suss it out, and we're like, you know what, I'll just do this thing or do that thing, but we're not actually standing on solid ground. But what God is trying to tell us seems foolish to us. What exactly feels foolish to us? That it's done, that it's complete, that it's already been created, that you need do nothing to make it come to pass, that you need to just sit still or be still. All of that seems ridiculous. I mean, I have to do this thing, I have to do that thing. Yes, in some capacity, yes, you do, but it's not you who's doing it. It's the Father within. It's the Father within you that does the work. But we get so lost in it that we can't see beyond the clouds. So, what is this foolishness? I want you to contemplate this. What is the foolishness that you are operating under, trying to fix something, trying to change something, trying to make something fit your human idea of what it is that you want. Like Neville points out, you guys, all we need to do is go to the end. We don't need to devise the means. This is what he's talking about. To devise the means is the foolishness. But we don't we give our imagination, we give our energy, we give our awareness to the means, to the strategy of making something come to pass, but we won't give that inner being, God, our silence, our awareness, and let things flow from that state. And you'd have to ask yourself, why do you do so? What's going on? Hmm, what? John, is my
There you are.
hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm having technical issues right now. My slides aren't working. Give me a second, guys.
All good.
Oh, all right, cool. Well, I'll do it from this angle. You guys can still see my screen?
Yes, you have something within.
Cool. You do have something within Oliemi. Do you believe? So Walter says this. He says, "Do you believe in the love of God as transcending all the hate of the conscious thinking, or do you believe a pygmy intellect, swelling itself with all sorts of imaginative powers? Do you believe that that can control, destroy, harm, or direct your path? In all thy ways of acknowledging him, and he shall direct thy paths, is just as true today as when it was first said. What do you care about the opinions and the beliefs of another if your path is being directed by him? Be still, be very still. You have something to hear that does not come through the noisy voice of man. It is wonderful, and so it is." You know, I was having a conversation with somebody um yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. And they have all these ideas of how to make something happen. And you know, they have their experts, they have their mentor, they have, you know, all the history of how something needs to be done. And I was saying to them, you know, it was like, actually, those are all really cool things. I actually agree to those things. But what does your true self actually say about this? I noticed that you are looking outside of yourself, looking to all these other experts to tell you if this is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. But how often do you commune with your own self and let that thing come to you, through you, and for others?
You
So
know,
this,
usually when I'm, oh, sorry.
oh yeah,
I
so
didn't realize it was rhetorical. My bad.
yeah, it's rhetorical. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. I want y'all to just contemplate the words that are coming through, and we'll have a conversation. So when you find yourself lost in the making something happen, or even you find yourself struggling to make the moves that you know that you should be making, and you make them, but you don't see the results, or you feel exhausted, or you feel more agitated than you were before you started, symptoms like that. Ask yourself, did I rely on that something within me, or did I rely on the knowledge of human thinking? See, when I was in the process of moving to Hawaii, I didn't know, I didn't know that one, Hawaii was where I was going to live. When I figured out what Hawaii was where I was going to live, I didn't know how I was going to be able to pay for it, how I was going to get there, what things I needed to do. I didn't even know anything about Hawaii, but there was something in me that was calling me and drawing me to where I am now. And when I look back on all the things we had to do in order to get here, there's no way I could have planned it. No way whatsoever. There were certain things that I planned, but I was called to plan those things, right? Like making a plan to sell all our stuff in an efficient way, right? But every single step that I took, most of them weren't planned. I went to the end and I dwelt there. And when others came into the picture and were like, well, why don't you do it this way? Or why don't you do it that way? I couldn't. I could feel it within myself that I was like, no, as much as I might agree with your strategy, that's not what's coming from within. And I could only recognize it because of the stillness within me that recognized that end. What is the end? That is done and the creation is finished. By recognizing that something within, I actually had to remove myself from my preconceived notions of how things operate here because I was ascending to a higher level that already knew how the thing came to pass. I couldn't actually operate from the conscious human thinking, which is only used to what has come before, or rational thinking, which is only used to that which has come before. Rational thinking can't see what's going to come or what's in the process of coming, which is why we have to die daily. So Walter says, we are not going to heaven, but we are performing death in the belief that we are in hell, trying to work out our way into heaven through a never-ending corridor of problem. There is a fearless approach to the world of death in this sense, an almost friendly idea. It appears to be one of the cleansing agencies. The power of life and death are in the tongue. To die daily, as Paul instructs, is to be born daily. It is a letting go of used ideas and a taking up of new and fresh possibilities without any hangovers or memories or beliefs. The former things shall pass away, they shall not be remembered nor come into mind anymore. When you are learning to drive a car for the first time, it is absolutely awkward. It is a hot mess. It is you can't coordinate your hands, you can't coordinate your feet, you can't coordinate your eyes and your brain. But here we are today, many years later, and you've completely died to that version of yourself, to where it's like those thoughts and those memories kind of pass away. And just like that, that's the process in which you go through. We are constantly and forever going through stages, stages of birth and death, death and birth. So we look at this flower called the dandelion here, and I thought that this was an awesome illustration that I could use to illustrate what we're talking about here. We are constantly in a growing state. We get to a budding state where something new is coming. And then we have the flower, we have its harvest or whatever it is. But once we come to flower, we have to go to then to seed. And when we go back to seed, our seed needs to be spread. And now we have nothing but this dead stalk. But worry not, because as these seeds are spread, new flowers are to come, only to repeat the cycle again. So every time we have a desire for something, that's just the bud of that which has already been created. And once it's been accepted, truly accepted, and you go within and you recognize that presence, that's when the flowering stage comes. But because of this, remember, anything that happens on the outside is ever changing. So you can't necessarily be lost in this 3D world holding on to, all this fruit that you've had and then rely on the things that created that fruit, because really what you're supposed to do with fruit is take the seeds and spread those so you can have new life and go through that cycle every day. So every morning we wake up with the gratitude and recognition of the presence of God within us, the presence of our wish fulfilled within us, the presence of that which you desire within you, and go about your day going through the same cycle as the dandelion, but this time consciously. Because in doing so, not only are you taking birth and death and seeing how they're one and the same, you're bringing that power to life. You're seeing the former things pass away, old beliefs, old memories, old sabotages, whatever you want to call it. Those things are all in passing. So a tiny plant starts from its cell and the seed dies. It pushes forth a bud, the flower comes, and the scales or outer leaves die. The flower is born. The fruit pushes out into manifestation, and the flower dies. And so it goes ever on and upward into more glorious manifestations of heaven here and now. The never-ending merging into new and lovelier states takes place when you are ready to die. And when the last enemy has become the friend and the sting has been taken from it. So I said that sentence really weird, but what he's talking about here is what seems to be negative, error, impossibilities is actually your friend. It's a seed. It's a form of your manifestation in its process of unfolding. But what happens usually to the human thinking, rational brain is, why does this keep happening? Why do I keep going through this? This is never going to work. This is never going to end. I'm saying this from experience because I'm going through it right now in certain areas of my life. But I always, at the end of every day, I recognize what really occurred, which was perfection. Because that's all God can see. All God can see is turning enemies into friends. He doesn't even recognize enemies. There can be no enemies because he created them. And by them, I mean creation, created creation. It's our human thinking that sees things as enemies. But when we actually have that recognition of the presence within, everything changes. So gradually, man is beginning to see the difference between the presence and the intermittent demonstrations of power. It is true that a parrot could be taught to recite the rules of a difficult problem, yet it could not solve a problem at all. A child may memorize the working of a single problem, yet if the next problem deviates from the straight and narrow way of his memory, but a fraction, he is lost, bewildered, and unable to get the answer. When you seek me after the loaves and fishes, you cannot find me, for you have mistaken appearances for reality and have failed to comprehend the principle. When you call upon the principle, when you recognize the presence, then you are ready to make the acknowledgement of him in the midst of the evil appearance, which is called problem. I have a problem. No sooner is this done than the problem is swallowed up in the appearance of the fulfilled acknowledgement. So that thing you call problem, it's so funny. I had a conversation with Oyemi, I think was it yesterday, and he's quick to point out that, dude, it's no problem. It's taken care of. It's all good. But my human thinking can't let that be true. But no sooner is this done than the problem is swallowed up. Really, truly recognize, you guys, that that thing that seems like a problem, 5 years from now, it won't be a problem. So you might as well right now recognize the false nature of even recognizing it as a problem. I'm forgetting the quote off the top of my head right now, but Neville says something along the lines of imagination is the solution of ever-present synthetic problems. And I kept noticing he would say synthetic problems, as in fake problems. It ain't real. It seems real, but it's actually synthetic. God creates no errors. So nothing can separate or nothing can or will separate you from this presence, but your own conscious thinking, your failure to acknowledge him. Who is him? God. Who is him? The cause. Who is him? That higher self that has already achieved whatever goal you have set. Love is the fulfilling of the law. And this love is something from which you cannot possibly be separated from. In all thy ways, in every way, thy going out and thy coming in the ways of business, in the ways of leisure, in all thy ways, suddenly a new glory hovers over the whole of creation. Heaven and earth are full of thee, and the fulfilling of the law takes place through the love and not through the ugly trials and experiences of the conscious thinking. So, in all thy ways, no way is too small to acknowledge him. It becomes a joy and a glory to feel this presence in everything. So, isn't it wonderful that something marvelous is happening to me right now? Was a phrase that one of Neville's students would say often to themselves. And, when I was first studying this work, and I would be like, this whole being grateful thing, like I'm grateful for the things I have here in this physical world, but I'm still not seeing any changes. And it's like, it's not about being grateful for the things you physically already experienced. All this stuff is dead. All this stuff is in waning. The very fact that it's here in this physical world. So yes, be grateful for those things, but what we're being asked to do is in all thy ways, recognize the presence, recognize the fulfillment. That thing that seems to not be here, be grateful that it is here already, pushed down, runneth over. And there's nothing too small. So when you get that, before you even get that drink of water, go within and be grateful for it before you even take a sip. I mean, it's so easy in the physical world for us to be like, oh, I'm thirsty. I'm just going to go to the fridge and go get some water. We live in the first world. In the first world, that stuff is easily accessible to us. Great. So we kind of just take it for granted and we just go to the fridge and get it. And then we were like, oh, I'm so grateful that I had a glass of water. No, be grateful for the glass of water before you even get up out of your couch. And not be grateful for the water that's about to come out of the tap or your water bottle, but be grateful for the presence of the power that would have even had that water come into being in the first place. So, in conclusion, have you ever said, thank you, Father, and actually believed that what you thank the Father for was already there? Why not be honest? Perhaps you have wished it or hoped for it or beseeched God for it, but that it, but that is not the question. That is not the question that has to be answered. Did you ever find yourself saying, thank you, Father, and believing that it was done? If so, you saw it manifested before your eyes in a manner and after a fashion of the appointing of God. Until you recognize this glowing presence which doeth the works, you will be so hedged with about with the limitations that you will give up. When you once come to the understanding that you do not have to do the works, you will permit the works to flow through into manifestation. You will understand the power of the word. Thank you, Father. The full recognition of the thing taking place here and now. And also, you will completely shift the how, why, when, and where of the embodiment of that which you have accepted as to forget about it all. So, in this conclusion that, or I'm closing this part of the series up with, a simple thank you and recognition that it is done is all we truly need to do. I don't know how that looks like for you. I know, some people will go and do their breath work and others will do scripting, others will have their affirmations, but none of that does you any good if you can't within yourself recognize the presence, recognize the very power and wisdom that created the thing that you think you desire. Just recognize that. Could it be true that this presence that even put me here on this planet is always with me? That I can actually recognize this thing that I want within me? That is the invitation. So I'm opening the floor up for question and answer. Peace and hair grease.